All right. Well, welcome everybody to today's Lunch and Learn. We are, thankful to have Joshua spend some time with us today to talk a bit about regeneration and decentralization. I could give him an intro, but I think it's best to hear it straight from him. So, Josh, without further delay, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll get things started.
Thanks again for having me here. It's been pretty exciting collaborating with VDAO and gradually infiltrating the ranks here over time, getting to know folks, catching up with folks all over the world. Like you were saying, it's been pretty amazing connecting with people in different countries while traveling through events and then being able to reconnect digitally here as well in calls and chat groups. And that's kind of what's really been inspiring. I'm probably going to meander a bit here, quite a bit, and I'm also going to be interested in actually throwing out kind of some ideas and getting feedback from folks, just kind of opening a conversation somewhat here. So, usually the hand wave or pause, is a good way for people to engage, and so we're not all talking over each other. But yeah, definitely a lot of my travel recently has kind of been building on what we've already been building for a while. I'm a founding member of Loci, Crystal, and a couple other folks here. And I'll just give a quick spiel on that. Loci, Loci, is a Latin word for places. And so we've just been focusing on how do we actually do the hard work of developing the places for people, a little bit outside of the ideological sphere, not so much about we want people that are like-minded, but rather people that are all committed to building social structures and communities for the future. And so our focus is places, we're really kind of focused on the land, the finance, the operations, the boring but essential stuff there. And as I've been traveling here, engaging in events and participating with folks, it's definitely become clear that there's a crossroads that I think we really need to emphasize and be aware of here across all these different projects and these different areas that people are working on. And so I've been settling, I think this is probably what aligns me with VDAO so much and a few other groups. I've been settling on this idea that we actually need to have an incredibly integrated approach to decentralized and regenerative solutions. Um, and for a few reasons. One of the first things that is most important is that these are kind of different audiences. And as I've been floating between all sorts of different spaces, I was just in Bangkok and then in flip-flops in Thailand and then flew over to straight to Dubai and threw on a suit and was meeting with, big family offices and government agencies and whatnot, ministers. This has really, become more and more poignant that there are a whole bunch of different audiences and somewhat siloed groups that are focused, whether it's crypto, whether it's tech, which are even different areas, regenerative systems, intentional communities, governance communities, government agencies, finance audiences, financiers, investors. There really are all these different audiences that are all speaking about the same things. And so what I'm seeing across this whole kind of global spectrum right now is a convergence where we have all these different audiences, these different folks that are coming together and actually landing in the same space, which are human solutions. So we can say very easily that we're creating human solutions, but of course that's super complex. Schmuchtenberger talks about the meta crisis and meta solutions. And so there's really this idea that there's a lot of complexity in it, but we actually find a very simple common ground, which is human solutions. So I think the effort is really focusing on the integration and combination, like the crossroads of regenerative and decentralized solutions, because those things are essential to creating these human solutions. And the regenerative spot is kind of a newer term, followed the sustainability or sustainable solutions. Has typically been in the agriculture side, energy production side, these spaces that are kind of focused more on nature and production. And I think it's also important to think about regenerative systems when it comes to economics and the way that organizations operate, and understand that this concept of regeneration is really about not just making crops grow better or reusing soil, but also how are we using resources financial resources, energy resources, social capital, and actually getting those to repopulate and regenerate and move forward. The other concept there on decentralization is critical because it's the consolidation of resources that really has led to a lot of our issues. The effort to consolidate resources and the scarcity of resources for other. The reality is that there's plenty of resources in the world for everyone. And so the question is, how do we actually decentralize that? And that doesn't mean taking from rich, giving to poor. Doesn't, there's a lot of these very short-term linear kind of approaches that create strife and confusion. But decentralization really speaks more to how do we create systems that are more distributed, and those are geographically distributed, economically distributed, governmentally distributed. These are both philosophies, regenerative and decentralized, that tie very closely to how humans have functioned through all of our history and how we need to function moving forward. So it's really a conceptual approach, but then there's a lot of specific systems that we'll start chatting about also that feed into that. The other thing that is really important in blending together the regenerative and decentralized movements are that it needs to be multi-generational. So we have to approach these things to some degree from a conceptual approach, even though we're working on actual solutions, but we have to hold those solutions kind of loosely and understand that what we're building for is a future that we don't actually know yet. So we don't know exactly what 2-3 generations out are going to need or want, but we do need to be able to create the mechanisms and the vehicles that will actually allow that to happen. So decentralization and regenerative approaches to these solutions that we're creating actually leaves the final solution kind of open, but creates systems that will allow emergence within them. So that's kind of the fun, philosophical, conceptual stuff. I think I've probably talked hours with folks, most of you in this call, about this at one point or another, and it's fun to go into a lot of the conceptual things. And I'm interested in the sociology, anthropology, and all these perspectives. But I'll just go through quickly and start kind of talking about some pragmatic things. And just to give you a quick background here, I'm a professional opportunist, management consultant. I have a addiction to travel in the world, and I've built businesses to support my travel addiction. So I've worked in a lot of different industries. I have a crazy, weird, strange spectrum of professional backgrounds. And so that kind of leads me to this generalist approach where I know a lot about a little bit of stuff and a little about a whole bunch of different things, and rarely do those things cross. So I've got a lot of kind of high level things that I can talk about here, and I'm going to name some solutions out there. And then I'm happy to connect with people if there's anything specifically interesting there that you're like, oh, what's this about? What's this about? I'm always happy to point people in the right directions to get details that are more helpful for them. So I guess we'll start a little bit in the regenerative space, in the agri-communities movement, which is something that we're particularly interested. So obviously regenerative agriculture, regenerative communities, regenerative cities are very interesting. That's a lot of what VDAO is focused on in Fifth World, which is behind VDAO here. We just posted this morning a great interview with Kevin from Fifth World. And, that's actually the practical, pragmatic solution. So these are folks that are working with specific projects, communities, properties, individuals, businesses to make sure that regenerative systems are deployed in there to keep this property or this project running well. And so there's a lot of very pragmatic things that tie into that. We are particularly interested in rural development around the world to solve food deserts and rural community issues. Just to start bringing up kind of one topic here. And I'll use this as an example. So one of our goals, and where I think we see a real benefit here, is if we're able to go into rural communities that don't have a lot of solutions, food desert, they don't have fresh food nearby, there are now a whole bunch of solutions available where you can go in and actually really create a fertile soil for not just food production, to reduce food scarcity, but also to generate the ecology in that area. We have a community that we're looking at working with here in Arizona that's out in the desert. And then we're connecting with a program called VRM Biologic, which creates soil, like actual fertile soil out of barren land. They're actually developing wheat fields out in Amman, Jordan, and turning the desert into soil. Steve's here in the call. Managing water is massive with PSKL. So if you're able to manage water, push that water into the right places, get the flow going, and then also at the same time deploy this other soil treatment program that creates a actual microbiology within the soil. Now you have a self-sustaining ecosystem that starts to grow. And so we can go into an area, introduce an agriculture solution there that actually repopulates the soil and starts to produce food and plants that seed literally for prosperity for that community. We also are working with GeoGrow from Fresh Produce Supply, which is an amazing product. It's the vertical agriculture product. And that ties in with everything else, right? So I'm going to be speaking a lot about how these different things integrate with each other. GeoGrow produces the produce that we need indoors, very efficient. They're actually sending a system up to space at the space station, but they need soil. So we now able to produce soil from VRM Biologic. We're able to produce and nurture that soil from PSKL with water flowing through. The nutrients start to create this organic symbiosis. And then we have food, we have waste that comes from that. We put that back into the soil treatment, and we create this, circular ecology that's happening within an ecosystem. So that's just one application where you actually can have the regenerative element. We're actually interested in connecting that to the community element by then having an agriculture system that is serving the community and the community who's able to work within the agriculture system. Some of these are going to be high level ideas, but we're just kind of talking about how these things lay together. So we can actually then start to tie in decentralized economics with this, where you have a community that is both funding the agriculture and soil system through small local investments, also working for this solution, whether they're actually manning the agriculture, manning the soil treatment programs, end up with microeconomics where people are compensated for their contributions to this program, and then they're benefiting both from the food and also actual investment from that. So we'll get into decentralized finance stuff here shortly, but this starts to create the combination between an actual regenerative, natural, organic food production system with the community, and the community ownership plays into this, community participation, contribution plays into this. These things get complex when you get into the economics, the spreadsheets, but really human life is complex. So this is just a matter of basically penciling these things out, working the calculations, and actually deploying kind of traditional legacy systems to solve problems. The other area of regeneration, regenerative processes that's really important that I'm excited about is construction. There are a whole bunch of really interesting solutions emerging right now. This dome here is something that we're working on building, which is actually a 3D printed concrete dome. And it's a test that we're developing with the group that's developed this. But somebody had mentioned geoship domes, and I'm an ambassador for geoship domes also, so good to see you in here. Geoship domes is an incredible modular construction solution where they're creating bioceramic panels that all merge together and create full home-sized solutions. And so you can have a really high degree of scalability for community development, where you can have, I think we're at 1,500 square feet for the units right now, full house, multi-bedrooms, bath, kitchens, but with bioceramics that are ecologically friendly, at a cost savings compared to stick frame construction right now. High speed construction, because you send all the modules out there, they're actually produced in the factory, modules are sent out there and you assemble them. Not just ideal for different climates, but also very storm resistant. So we're looking at deploying this in Florida, Appalachians right now, where there's been some pretty devastating storms recently. And of course, because of their shape, their construction, the way that they are designed and interlinked, all these pieces are interlinked, they're very resistant to high winds. So these things can be deployed all over the world, highly scalable, cost effective, and still regenerative and ecologically friendly. So that's one construction method there, and there are tons more construction methods that are emerging, but we're clearly starting to get to a place where we don't have to rely on just cutting down massive forests anymore to just pump out trees and hammer them together. This, of course, goes into space stuff, but I'm more interested about what we're doing here on planet Earth. So I'll avoid the Starship and Moon and Mars colony conversations for now. We could talk about that on the side if you want. Waste treatment, when we talk about land development and construction, there are a lot of systems you have to think about when you get into this. Working in the network state kind of space, network societies, startup cities, there are a lot of people that are incredibly ambitious, really thinking about huge projects. How do we build cities? And there are a lot of systems that have to be very well thought out to make that work. Very few cities have been planned, and they've pretty much only succeeded. Dubai, Singapore, a few others have only really succeeded on the short term as a result of benevolent authoritarianism and a huge amount of capital that was able to get pumped in there and have it organized. So people are very excited about places like Dubai and Singapore, but that's not necessarily the norm of how humanity has developed. Maybe we'll be able to get to that point, but we can actually start to plan out cities and think about them in a scalable approach where we start to say, okay, what are all the systems that maybe our approach is actually micro communities. Maybe we can start to develop these systems here. We're thinking about how it scales, but focus on a smaller footprint to start with. So we have to have waste treatment. Eden Energy is an awesome one that I'm connected with here out of Austin. They're actually have a system now verifiably that you can produce energy, fuel, through a similar process to pyroclastics, but you can basically take any kind of plastic products and it'll produce fuel without the burning that pyroclastics process produces. So it's actually an organic breakdown of plastics and you're able to produce a fuel from that. So if we can take waste and roll that into new fuels, then obviously that's a regenerative process. And another thing I want to speak to here on kind of the systems when we talk about social solutions, I was recently in an event where someone was talking about the carbon credits and this as a solution. And I think it's probably nice for a lot of systems out there, but it doesn't necessarily reduce waste. And one of the things that we're really missing, I think, in these conversations is when we talk about energy production, regenerative solutions, solar power, wind power, 98% of all the conversations I hear are about how do we produce energy more efficiently. I hear very little about how do we actually conserve energy? How do we produce less waste? And this is a really tough one because this is a cultural issue. This is not a tech issue. There's no tech solution to reducing waste consumption. There's not even a financial solution necessarily because there's no money in telling people to buy less, consume less. So there is actually an interesting solution that I learned from Chris here that VDAO is working on, which I'm sure was going to be coming up here soon, but a way to actually monitor the energy that you are consuming, reduce that, and then be rewarded for the reduction of your energy consumption. And I think that's really the way that we have to start thinking about how to promote really regenerative systems is how do we actually reduce our consumption, reduce our energy needs, reduce our food needs. These are very simple things like eat less, we have to produce less, but this is a major cultural hurdle. This goes back to why I think we need to combine these different approaches to hit this integration of audiences and multi-generational approach, which it's going to take 2 to 3 generations to actually weed out this approach of just massive consumption, right? It took us the Industrial Revolution until now for people to think that you can eat and burn and do whatever you want. It's going to take a while to get back and actually tie that down a bit more. So stay tuned to a VDAO solution here on energy reduction and rewards for that. I think that's probably a good little transition with rewards, going back to the decentralized side. Decentralization in governance is a topic that probably most of the people in this call are familiar with, some may not be. And this really ties to how do we govern communities and potentially how we govern society. And so this decentralization movement in that aspect is really about people's votes, people's opportunities to have their voices heard, and specifically to have some kind of impact and relatability to their lives as they're living it within any community. We obviously have seen an incredible movement in the US with voter turnout recently. We can talk all day about whatever anyone's opinions are politically, but the fact is that people came out and the participation that has emerged has mostly been because people are just pissed off. They're motivated, they're highly engaged, and they're wanting to actually have some say in it. Now, whether voting for a president or a minister in any democratic system is the solution. I tend to lean more towards uh, the localized grassroots efforts and the multi-generational effort. Decentralization through blockchain accountability is actually making it possible for people to engage, communicate, have transparency and accountability in voting processes. And so a lot of communities are deploying this. We're using holacracy as a governance system to start with, that framework as far as how we have a non-hierarchical structure within our organization, within our community, to make decisions and to manage operations. And then there are a lot of branches that are coming out of that. Sociocracy was another version. There's quite a few solutions that are coming out. But whatever it is, we're all working towards solutions that say people need to have their needs observed and met and their voices heard, and in a productive way. So not just screaming, but actually how do we do this in a way that technology can support it and we can be productive. Decentralization is critical for finance also. I'm going to swing back around to this example of community and agriculture. And so I'm sure people have heard of crypto. Crypto is a thing. It's great, mostly gambling. But what we actually have is blockchain as a financial tool. And blockchain creates accountability. It's basically software coding that allows as a tech solution to be applied to finance. One of the things that I'm most excited about there is the ability to potentially finance local community projects, businesses that serve the community through community funds. So if you have a community of 10,000 people and even half of those people will throw in $500 each, you've got money to work with. And you can actually launch a for-profit organization. I like for purpose, right? For purpose is actually not nonprofit, but it focuses on the purpose and the social impacts. You can have funding come from a community. You can deploy that funding to create an actual solution. You can create a profitable solution, and that community is both going to benefit from the services and goods that that organization is producing, as well as any profit or return that comes from it. And all of these things start to create not just a circular economy, but multiple spirals of circles that keep feeding into themselves. So the success from this organization that was funded by the community can then breed other organizations which produce more funding. Mondragon is an excellent example for this out of Spain, and they've been around, maybe I'm wrong, but since the 50s, I believe. Yeah. So Mondragon is an incredible organization, one of the big multinational corporations in the world, industrial production. It's entirely a co-op structure, owned, governed, and managed, and benefiting the employees and the residents in the community. We have quite a few communities that are really starting to look at these financial solutions. Blockchain, again, is that actually the technology that just makes that manageable, efficient, transparent, and fair. We use also a program called Slicing Pie, which is great for startup programs to make sure that there's fair equity splits, so you can get a few partners together, start working out there. Lots of solutions out there to help people get started. And I think this is one of the messages that I'll probably keep coming back to, is that you can do all of this now. We have tools and solutions to do all of this now. And the question is, are we motivated enough to deploy it? And in some cases, can we survive long enough to scale it? All right, so there's a good point on decentralization. I'm sure you've seen, some of you have seen from the World Economic Forum, this campaign, you will own nothing and be happy. And this is a point I've been making quite a bit recently. We really focus more on a movement of own everything and be free. And so we believe that ownership and participation, financial participation, ownership, governance, this participation creates a new culture of stewardship. The decentralization empowers us because it connects people to assets, connects people to real life. But this integration and this connection, not just between humans and nature, but humans and community, humans and technology, humans and products, it creates a relationship where we actually start to steward the assets we have, stewards the land we have, it stewards the world we have, and it changes how we relate with everything around us, which eventually changes how we relate with each other And that's what we really need. There's no tech solution here. There's no government solution. There's no corporate solution. In the long term, the only solution is make better people. And if we need to make better people, we have to use these systems to create an environment where better people can actually flourish and grow. The relationship with land is an important one. Trusts are really starting to emerge for land ownership, for building projects. Recommon is an amazing program that unfortunately just kind of shut down operations recently, but they were developing bioregional trusts. They're facing one of the problems that a lot of our efforts, I think, are facing, which is that it's hard to raise capital from existing structures. And so they weren't able to raise enough capital to keep their effort going. And so they had to start working on other projects. This is true for probably most of the people here in this call who are in projects or trying to build projects or trying to get your place in the world. The struggle is real. And I think we're all here because we're looking for community, for support. Everybody's looking for funding also. But there is definitely a power in this decentralized movement, which integrates all of our efforts in different areas and starts to create a powerful force that's networked around the world for good. That's kind of a point that I'll move into a little bit here, which is the relationship I was speaking to earlier that's been developing as I've been working with VDAO, Build Cities. Build Cities is a great platform for this, and so many Telegram communities that many of you are in, Telegram, WhatsApp communities, Facebook pages. Besides the integration of regenerative and decentralized, we also need to integrate localized and networked. And so within the localized effort, we have incredible power. We have existing relationships. You have this IRL experience where we can actually connect, see eye to eye, share a meal, sit down, talk, laugh, cry, have the truly organic human experience that we all really want to have deep within us. And when we break away, we're able to maintain network connectivity all over the world. I've been doing this a long time. Many other people here have lived this kind of nomad traveling life for a long time, 20 years or so at least, since the technology really became available to everybody. And for those who have been mostly digitally native, we're seeing a big return back to IRL, big return back to what are our in-person experiences. That's why conferences, I think, are becoming so powerful. Meetups, pop-up villages. Chiang Mai was amazing. All these places I'm traveling, people want to connect with each other in real life, and they also want to go off and do their own thing and stay connected digitally. So we definitely have a massive shift in social structure, and we call it lifestyle liquidity, which is this ability to flow through places. Not just places, but flow with your finances and flow with your work and your contributions. So whatever you're building, whatever we're coming up with, I think that there is a huge focus on how do we make it possible for people to move, to flow, to have freedom. Free Them project, Susanna is an awesome one there. Essentially the freedom to be able to live your life the way you want to. And our core organic life is actually semi-nomadic, right? So hunter-gatherers, whatever it is, you need to have at least the freedom to move if you want to move around, to be in different places, experience different relationships. From this comes a very rich experience. From this comes stewardship, awareness of the world around us. These are the things that actually start to create better humans over time and start to change the world for what we want, where we want it to go, really. So that lifestyle liquidity is important. The decentralization feeds into that. The regenerative solutions support the sustainability of that. And all these things are starting to coalesce. And I see this everywhere I'm going. The conversations are merging. People are showing up from different spaces, just like Susanna, a couple of people said today, I don't know what I'm doing here. I've shown up at meetings, webinars over the last 3 years as we've been building Loci. Rarely have much of a clue of what's going on, but I know the calling is there. I know the people that are showing up are the people who want to connect. And so through this integration of audiences, tech solutions, organic solutions, we're really starting to get solutions for humans across the board. So that's kind of my spiel there so far. I can go into all sorts of other tangents. Hopefully, my connection is okay. I had a little bit of instability for a second there. Um, I'd kind of like to maybe throw it back to Ben here if you want to take the reins and maybe we see if there's questions, comments. I'm sure I have more stuff to go there. I definitely function better in conversation than pitches or speeches. I do see a bunch of chats in here, so yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe this is a great opportunity for people to start sharing some thoughts, maybe some of the things that maybe resonated with them and how it relates to what they're doing, maybe. So feel free for anybody to go ahead. I believe there is a hand raise function. If you look at the underneath the reactions tab on Zoom there, you'll find a raise hand and raise your hand. Otherwise, feel free to unmute yourself. But if it does get a bit messy and too many people are unmuting at the same time, then we'll go to that raise hand function.
And I'll start just poking at a couple of the questions and comments in here too. John's got an awesome one here in terms of jobs, educating people, monitoring, etc. This is really interesting. Education is key just from bottom to top, right? I've had particular interest. My father was an educator. I've done a little bit of education and youth work in my days. Crystal comes from the education background, so these are really critical thoughts. And what we're actually seeing, there is a group over in Europe. Ed is one of the leaders there, but we have the network school, right? Another example, which many of you might be familiar with, came from Balaji and the network state movement. Education for new work paradigms is critical. In Dubai, I actually spoke on the panel that was specifically addressing workforce digitalization and AI and robotics and what that means to the workforce. So from an operations background, my background has really been in business design, operational development, administration, all these things. This is very top of mind. Not just education, but what are the operational senses within this new future paradigm? Education is not just going to be tech, but we have right now in the US at least an emergence of trades. So this is starting to become more popular where young people are getting back into trades, which we've lacked dramatically. So we need to have, not everybody's going to be a digital nomad. We have physical places we need to build and operate and manage, and we need people physically working in those spaces. So I think we'll see what I think we're already starting to see is actually this kind of shift where before it was like physical trade work way lower than digital trade. But I think what's happening is we're starting to realize like you can't have one without the other. Like you don't get to work on your computer if there's no table to work on and no house to be in and no roof to be under and there's no infrastructure. DPIN, which is decentralized public infrastructure networks, is really going to take off quickly. Althea is an awesome network for this. But that's the ability for not just people to invest in their public infrastructures, and this is waste, communications, power distribution, all the things that you have in your daily life that most people don't think about. But also, how do people work within those sectors, benefit from it, and it creates another symbiotic circle there, right? So the education is definitely happening. People are learning about new paradigms. Again, network state school, the network school is really good at teaching people how to think about these communities that they're developing, decentralization and tech, these different topics that apply to that kind of in the soft skill side. The other side that's critical, going back to decentralization, what I mentioned briefly before, is that there has to be accounting for contributions to community. We're not actually doing anything new in creating community models here. Hippies did it a long time ago. They tried really hard. People have been forming villages since the dawn of time. But those villages and those communities only work to a certain scale. And so if we want to actually have that ethos and the culture that emerges from a tight-knit community and that actually has integration of people that are able to work and service their community and contribute, we actually need scalable solutions and we need accountability. I like to say, like with the hippie and intentional movements, the love and the ideals attract incredibly powerful. They bring people together, but they don't make the business work. They don't make the operations sustainable. So we can have people working in a community, contributing to a community, but we need to have an accounting system for that. We're working on designing that system within our Loci structure. We're taking fair market or any type of work someone does based on what the market kind of already has established for that value. We account for that value within our ecosystem, within our economy, and then we compensate them within our economy with a points, you can call it tokens credit system, that is then used and redeemed to keep using their properties and to have access within this economy. And then people are able to use these tokens. So the crypto space, the tokenized system actually makes it possible for ecosystems to solve for the ambiguity of contributions. Let's make it clear, transparent, like accountable, make sure that people understand the value they're contributing and understand the value they're receiving for that contribution. Those are a lot of boring, nerdy things, but they are super critical, I think, to making these things work. Yep, laborers, safety is key. That's a good thread going on there. Those are all benefiting from the transparency and the accountability that we're able to deliver through tech as a tool. And so hopefully we really use that for good. Proof of presence and proof of sweat. Yeah, Eric, that's a good one. There are so many different models that are emerging right now. And I think what we'll probably see, a lot of these different models are like, how do we actually demonstrate and support participation and contribution within communities? These communities that we're kind of talking about and we're working on developing are sandboxes. So we are playing with all sorts of different ideas. This video that we published this morning with Kevin from Fifth World, I mentioned this. There's a big movement, or there's a lot of talk in these movements about, well, what is the solution that's going to really be globally adopted? What platform, what protocol? Is Bitcoin the answer? Is Prospera the answer? Prospera is a project down in Honduras, which is really aspirational. I don't think there is any answer. There is a spectrum of human solutions that emerge. And so I don't even think we have the right solution. We're literally testing and deploying a solution. Within Build Cities, we have the Build R&D, which is a group of us that are working together on how do we research, how do we develop ideas, how do we deploy these within community models and find what actually works for people. So you can get deep into the tech, you can get deep into the governance, and those rabbit holes are as far as you can possibly think you can go with them. But there are a whole bunch of solutions that are emerging right now. And so for anybody who's actually interested in building, this is what it's about, is us showing up in these calls, spouting off a bunch of things that we're aware of, that we're working on, that we know other people are working on, and actually supporting each other by directing each other to the solutions that we know that are out there. We don't need to reinvent wheels in most cases. So how do we integrate all these communities, integrate these solutions, and make them work? Yeah, Gustavo, there's tons of accounting systems, tons of tech. You're saying many super focused on this in Web3. That is actually one, I think it's a benefit and a little bit of a distraction. It's really tough in this space when we talk about regenerative stuff, especially when we talk about land development and community development. It's such a different paradigm than Web3, Web2, Web1. You can get 10 grand, support yourself for 6 months. Our software platform, we're looking at 75 grand in 3 months to deploy our MVP. Well, that's not the same when it comes to land. Right? You don't get to fail fast on a waste treatment system. You don't get to iteratively build a house. You can build things out in phases. You can something and then execute it in approach. But it's very different than the digital approach or even some of the business, cycles of development. When you're developing an app, you can throw something out there and just keep iterating and keep making it better and better and better over time. That doesn't work the same for real world solutions when it comes to the places people are living, and the basic Maslow's needs that have to be met, right? If you're developing an agriculture system, you lose your crop, you're done for the season. Maybe shorter if you're doing indoor hydroponics or different kind of vertical agriculture systems, but there's definitely a disconnect. This goes back to why I think it's so important to integrate these different audiences and solutions. It's a different concept, different mindset, different paradigm when you're crossing the bridge from the digital development side to the physical development side. And so those people that are developing in Web3 need to be very conscious of that when they're developing solutions for IRL, for real world assets. There has to be a clear bridge between those two. There are also a lot of really brilliant people coming up with tech solutions that are not even particularly connected with the problems in the first place. So it's important, if you're going to develop any solution for humans, got to take the time to do whatever you can to understand the humans, the users, your audience, not just like UX, but actually what is the core human needs that people need to be met here. Nice for throwing a slicing pie link out there. Yeah, slicing pie is an awesome solution. Thanks for sharing that, Eric. All right, Ben, I think it was you asking about waste reduction and greater focus and feedback loops. Well, this is interesting. We have definitely a problem with corporate capture on things like recycling and waste. Media really hypes up a lot of scary things, and there are definitely problems, but we have a lot of noise. Kevin spoke to this, was great about signal to noise ratio, right? So it's really important to focus on what are the real problems, what are the real data on these problems, right? We have these lots of posts that get shared all over the place about these massive swirls of plastic in the ocean, and somebody the other day was telling me about how all humans have this massive percentage of plastics in their brain, and we're all going to die from this in the next 10 years. And of course, I went down the rabbit hole, found the study, and it was like a study done on, I think, 200 people in the Southwest out in this little town of New Mexico. It's like, well, that's a nice, scary thing. And yes, we should think about this, but it's not actually the problem. So the first thing we have to do is really get data um, appropriately collected and shared. The feedback loops are, if you're interested in this, then it's important to put a little bit more effort to find out what the real story is there, like what's really happening, and not just necessarily go straight to the click share thing, which is a problem on pretty much every topic in our life right now. If we're going to share and be advocates for things that are important, like waste reduction, like energy production, any of these things, then we do need to look deeper into it to make sure we kind of know, we have a sense of what this is really about, so we can work on those solutions. I think there's some interesting things happening in that space where if we're going to be testing this out a bit in the rural community development, we can start to track, well, what's the real waste production of this community? How much is going into the local landfill? We know already recycling is not operating at the level that we thought it would, or that it's often kind of communicated, but what is it actually doing? Like, how productive is it? So there's definitely an opportunity to have tech solutions that monitor what's happening there and make sure that we're getting clear information, which then helps us come up with better solutions that are more accurate there. And there's like Steve's got the great solution with water, right? Water waste is a massive problem. If we can reallocate that appropriately, then we're not even losing that. We're actually able to regenerate that back into the community and cycle it through. Yeah, Christian, sense and respond, experimentation and evolutionary development. That's absolutely it. In that sense, we do actually use some of these more modern management development processes. So we're able to actually use some tech to be able to monitor what's happening and go through an iterative process, especially through governance and some of the more soft operational models. See, Abu, good to see you, man. Thank you for joining. Michael, yeah, okay, good. Health, diet, and lack of exercise. Whatever you say of the US political thing that's happening, if we can just make progress on this Make America Healthy Again, and better yet, make the world healthy again effort, I think that's going to completely change our paradigms. Crystal is particularly focused on this as far as in the space of really focusing on that whole food chain. Um, we're going to be, here's a quick little plug. We'll be sharing more information as we go. We're going to be launching in spring a big campaign around the west of the US called the Regen Roadshow. And part of what our focus here, showcasing a whole bunch of the brands and systems and solutions we've been kind of talking about today. But a lot of this is really focused on what is the entire food chain and how that ties into lifestyle. I think if we create healthier people, we do this through economic means, through production means, we actually start to change how people think. Again, this is a cultural shift more than a tech or a production shift. But focusing on health, wellness, with really kind of going back to some traditional legacy approaches is core to actually creating regenerative society and cycling that through there. So that would be a massive shift. I know for sure it would help me out. I'm constantly working on it. Get more active, eat better. It's a daily thing, but it changes how we think about how we're living, and it also changes our stewardship of ourselves, which then also changes how we think about our stewardship of the world we're living in. Gym should be free, Michael. Yeah. We got a forest out here. That's free. The reality is there's no cost to take the initiative to do anything, really. Um, you get out and walk around the block. That's progress. That's a good step in the right direction. Hey, thanks, Sasquatch. Great to have you here. Eric posted Coordinate. Yes, I am familiar with Coordinate. That's another good one. I haven't used it yet or dove too deep into it, but there are definitely quite a few solutions that have kind of emerged here and are just keep going. Oh, Collaborary, that's a new one. I haven't seen that. Gustavo shared Collaborary. Um, we have someone out of the Build Cities community he developed one called Incentive, which is specifically for grants to help grants connect and manage their funds for projects. So yeah, a lot of software platforms that are emerging. But again, all of these different tech solutions have variances. They have different ideas on how to do a certain thing, but they're all leading towards what is fair, transparent, accountable, effective, sustainable, regenerative. So I think it's really important to maintain that as kind of the mantra and focus on like that's what we're doing. Is I like to ask this a lot when I'm doing interviews, when I'm out there traveling, chatting with folks. Like, what is the actual thing you're that is solving the problem? And that's often something you hear, like they want to hear what's the problem and what's the solution. But it's really just good to have that as a guidepost for yourself. We started from day one with purpose, followed by a mission that supported purpose, followed by the business model that supports the mission that supports the purpose, followed by the things that actually are part of the. So it's you have to start at what is the most important thing, and the most important thing is often purpose and mission. And if you can do that, then you're going to end up designing what is necessary to arrive at that in the long run.
Hey Josh, just taking it back to the health thing, and bringing it back to like the agricultural aspect of what we were talking about just a minute ago. Do you see that there are opportunities in where tech can be applied to make regenerative agriculture a little bit more accessible to smaller scale farmers? For instance, I know quite some time ago, earlier in this year, we had an individual by the name of Christoph Hayes who works on robotic systems that implement things like AI, imaging to make it possible for farmers to abandon the monocropping and to potentially develop polycropping, where this robotic system can go in and actually do the weeding for the farmer, and be able to pick out, because of that AI tooling, what is a good crop and what is weed, and be able to remove those weeds. What are your thoughts on like just that in general, and what opportunities maybe exist?
Yeah, I think, again, let's go back to kind of the cultural approach. We have a bunch of people working on amazing tech solutions, right? So that creates a huge efficiency in crop management at large scale. Then we have on the other spectrum, well, let's say on the far end of the other spectrum is my crazy dad in the middle of the city with a huge garden in his relatively small backyard and chickens running around in there. He produces so many eggs, they'll never ever have to buy eggs again. It's a very manageable, small scale thing. A program just launched in the Netherlands, where I'm actually originally from. See you, Michael. Thanks for joining. A program just launched recently where there are incentive programs for people to have their own home gardens. So if we want to talk about what is the most scalable and most cost-effective approach, is just start growing your own stuff. This is where individual sovereignty starts to come into. This is where decentralization comes into. Rather than this kind of traditional approach to having huge food production centers, what we're actually advocating for is decentralized, geographically distributed food production centers. So again, this example in Arizona that we're working on, we're looking at this for Idaho, a whole bunch of states. It's part of our whole campaign that we're working on, is we can produce a lot of things locally for local audiences and local consumers. And that actually is way more manageable, especially with a lot of the tech solutions we have now, than to just create solutions at massive scale. So if we have the Midwest, this is probably going to be a paradigm shift for how most of our industrialization in the US and the rest of the world is. The Midwest may not be just the breadbasket anymore for the US. We can actually then geographically distribute, decentralize that production effort from one region that is so intensely impacted by nature and by seasonal changes, distribute that effort to produce good food into all sorts of localized regions with solutions that are sustainable and continue through climate fluctuations, then repurpose those areas that were traditionally fully agriculture and start to actually introduce residential solutions there. One of the things that we're really looking forward to doing is taking a farm, let's say a farm 100 acres, taking 20 acres of that, turning it into high yield agriculture through vertical agriculture systems that are very efficient, energy efficient, but high production, taking another 20, 30 acres, turning it into a micro community for residential use. And then we can return 50 acres or so, that half of this entire farm, back to nature. And a lot of these areas where we have massive agriculture solutions have completely stripped out all of the natural environment. So we're doing three things. We're actually increasing the production. We can still increase, we could potentially have a higher yield and production in that farm on a smaller space, introduce residential solutions to form a good community, and then return a portion of that back to nature. And it's like a triple win across the board there. So I think part of that is really thinking about not just what are micro solutions for the existing legacy solutions that we have, but rethinking it completely and flipping the whole model on its head and saying, yeah, it's going to be helpful for this weeding system to knock out big agriculture solutions, but how do we actually make it so we don't even have to rely just on those big agriculture solutions?
Yeah,
Hey,
really well
Christiane.
said. I totally agree. Christian, go ahead.
Yeah, I just so love that the topic of today, and I would just like to bring in the question of how the decentralized, more technology based side of decentralization, and the regeneration world could get better into communications, because big parts of those worlds don't know each other enough. And I just want to bring in an example that I followed some communications on LinkedIn, and somebody said, okay, I've just asked AI that question, blah, 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 whatever it was about regeneration. Somebody jumped in and said, have you ever thought how much water has been used while you've been using this AI? And then all of a sudden, this whole shitstorm went out about the water that is being used, and people jumping in and saying, I'm never going to use ChatGPT anymore. And I'm never, and it's like this, you know, we know how these crazes, this disaster thinking quickly takes on. And I'm just really, really interested, and to anybody, how can we bring these worlds closer together and into better communication and to learning from each other? Because honestly, if we understand how AI used in a responsible, regenerative way, and the regeneration movement with all the beauty that it brings to life, that is just wow. And yeah, so I'm just all excited about this. So thanks anyway.
That's a amazing question, and it goes exactly to kind of what I started out with here. It goes exactly to what VDAO is doing. It goes directly to what I think is happening and what's brought us all here. And the way that we get past that potential conflict is put people in the same room. So VDAO has done an amazing job with this out in, and I actually connected through VDAO originally through Build Cities, because I was a member of Build Cities, and they started launching events right when we were starting to launch events. So Loci, we were thinking, okay, we need to get people in the same rooms in person to talk and connect from different audiences, right? Build Cities, VDAO, a couple other groups started to push this as well. Build, events out in Belgium. This one in Bangkok was very interesting because it was adjacent to the big crypto conference, but it was clearly not crypto. It was out in nature, beautiful place, surrounded in trees, not far, 30 minutes, 40 minutes or so. It took a journey to get there. It took a little bit of time and effort to actually get to the location. And a lot of people that I saw showing up there were just walking in kind of starry-eyed, like, what are we doing here? This is an event. I finally made it here, but what are we actually doing here? And it was that interpersonal connection of people getting there who were coming from tech, connecting with some other people that were on the regenerative side, connected to me, who is really neither in any of those camps fully. I kind of consider myself champion for the normies. But the idea is that we're able to get people in the same room together. It quickly eliminates this digital contentiousness, right? People run their mouths all day on chats and threads and stuff. You get them in the same place talking, even if they're from different areas, you quickly start to develop a different type of rapport. So I think the impersonal, physical connection with people is critical. This is exactly our focus with Regen Roadshow, is actually a 45-day road trip in person around the US, starting on the west side of the US, and then in the fall, we'll do the east side of the US, and then take that internationally as well. But actually have these mini conferences, have these workshops, have these meetups, go to where the people are, rural communities and cities, spread it out, decentralize your physical presence all over the place, and invite everybody to come connect. And so getting that connection, bringing the people together and having them interplay and talk and get face to face, eliminate the digital anonymity and spitefulness that quickly emerges there. That's actually how we make this progress, not just between the different audiences, as far as tech, regenerative, but multi-generational. So we have a huge audience. A lot of our people are actually in their like 40s, 50s, 60s. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I was part of a community, or people's parents, Crystal and my parents, other people's parents who in the 50s and 60s were part of communities. and they're saying, oh, you guys are doing this again. This is happening again. People are connecting. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. If we can connect across audiences, across tech, regenerative, and also across generational audiences, that's where the real power comes from. There's resources, there's wisdom. We have to be able to bring these together, and it really only happens in the optimal way in real life. So I'm hoping you're going to make it over for this road trip, Christian. We're talking about getting you over here for that. Hope to have your experience mixed in there as well. What's going on, Steve?
Can I add some thoughts there, Josh?
Please bring it. I love it. We had a great
Sure.
chat a little while ago.
Yeah. So adding to what Christiane's saying and speaking a bit about the regenerative mindset rather than the scarcity mindset that Josh is talking to, I just wanted to talk to AI using up water or various crop techniques using up water. We actually have the same amount of water that we always have. It stays around the earth. It changes phases, it changes locations. We've got rising sea levels, we've got increased atmospheric moisture. So the paradigm change is, how do we get the water back onto the land? How do we increase our freshwater resources? And that's through ecosystems, self-replicating living systems. So that's, yeah, just wanted to emphasize that point, that the hubs and the decentralized communities that Josh is talking about, for me, they're really hubs that go out into the to affect the broader ecosystem. They're not hubs that draw in resources and create a moonscape elsewhere. So I just want to emphasize that point of scarcity versus abundance. It sounds like hippie BS, but there's actually ecological drivers that make these things function, and that's where we need to move.
That speaks kind of back to what I was talking about earlier also, is like there are a lot of media driven narratives that are, you know, dynamic. There are real data sets and there are real things happening also. So when you have appropriately managed water systems, you can actually account for what's happening, what's really happening in this water table, what's happening in the longer term. What can we do to, again, reduce consumption instead of increase production as the default solution? So a lot of that is, I mean, most people wouldn't even think about that. I do, just because I'm in the Northwest, so we have lots of water here, but water is everywhere. The question is, what are we doing with it? How are we using it appropriately? How are we using our energy appropriately? Are we wasting it? Are we conserving it? So yeah, that goes back to people complaining about water use for AI. That's someone who clearly saw a post somewhere which gave them enough of a sense of outrage to then start doing, spreading around everywhere else, but not actually putting the time to be like, well, what's really going on here? And you don't have to be a full scholar on that, but there's really an important level of skepticism that should be applied to everything. Trust but verify. So maybe you have a trustworthy source that's sharing some information about a problem, but let's make sure this makes sense, because otherwise, what are we really talking about? And how are we going to say that the solution is to do this if we don't know what the actual problem is there?
Definitely. And there are legitimate, like the scale of these challenges are legitimate concerns for sure. But yeah, it's to be proactive, you would restore massive ecosystems, and then you can prove out, well, we're actually changing the weather patterns by this much. We're changing the type of rainfall, how often it is. We're reducing the detrimental hydrological extreme events, and therefore we're entitled to this water that we've actually enhanced It's a bit of a bureaucratic way of going about it, but that's the possibilities when you restore ecosystems.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. Good to see you. Great to hang out with you in Bangkok also. Yeah, there's a great YouTube channel called, I mean, there's a whole bunch of projects out here kind of doing this. I spoke to VRM Biologic, which creates that humus soil-based system that actually produces water from the soil through organic processes. Dust Up's channel is in southwest Texas in a very arid region, and he's creating an ecosystem there to be able to change the climate as well. So planting trees, plants, and really trying to create a whole new fertile area where we know it was already there before and it was completely wiped out by cattle grazing. So a lot of these systems we can have huge impacts on, even locally. People don't think about how you can actually impact the local ecosystem down to even the rainfall, right, for a region just by changing what the vegetation is like. So solutions like you have, again, PSKL has like one amazing solution for the conservation management of the water. You mix that with the soil solution, you mix this with the vertical agriculture, you start to tie in communities so people are drawn there, people are connected to it. These are amazing kind of micro solutions to micro problems that are all part of a macro movement. And it's a long game, which is tough for a lot of people, especially investors. But the long game is what we really have to go after if we're going to change the world, right? Multi-generational solutions.
Yeah, to kind of come back to Christiane's question about bringing these two almost separate worlds together, the folks that are building very digitally, and then the folks that are, you know, getting their hands dirty in the soil, who are stewarding land. There's like this common thread that we've noticed at VDAO as we kind of are bringing these two groups of people together, is that within crypto you have this ethos of self-custody of assets, self-custody of data. Within the folks that are building on the ground and like the permaculture enthusiasts and, you know, ecological experts, there's this trend towards, you know, self-custody of food, self-custody of water, self-custody of energy, self-custody of shelter. So there's this common like cultural core or idea that kind of interestingly would bring them together if, to Joshua's point, you put them in the same room and you get them talking. I think there's a lot of folks that maybe think that that building just for building is not great. And there's a certain amount of understanding to this, right? But at VDAO specifically, we think about like how can we leverage technology that is usable to start tapping into nature's abundance, that using tech for things that make sense, that are for the benefit rather than just for tech's sake, right? And I think that's where that common ground can exist. And yeah, so I mean, it's definitely a question that we're constantly asking ourselves, is how do we bring these two people together? And you know, there's different solutions out there, and I don't think that, like, there's different tech solutions, I would say, that are around like coordination. I think blockchain, one of the beautiful things about blockchain is its ability to act as a really strong coordination layer, to coordinate globally, to bring local communities that are spread out all over the globe to coordinate together. It's this sort of think locally but act globally mindset that you can have, that's brought forward through that coordination layer. We haven't seen, you know, a perfect structure yet, and that's where like experimentation becomes really key. We got to see this experimentation happening quickly, happening often, so we can see what is working and what isn't, and pull what is good and what is working really well, and kind of piecing things together and keep building and keep developing systems to build eventually, hopefully, what will develop what we think is a promising idea, which is like regenerative network states.
Yeah, when you talk, that's a really good point there that I'm also really trying to drive home, is when you talk about self-custody. You know, I was at the Parallel Society Congress in Bangkok at the same time here. And so a lot of in the tech crypto blockchain space, there's this concept of self-custody, sovereignty, anarchy. Had lots of really cool conversations with anarchists and anarcho-capitalists. And a lot of times people are not really thinking about what's the real definition of this word, and there's a lot of terms and stuff that get tossed around. Just same in regenerative, sustainable. There's always keywords and key phrases and hashtag this and that. But there's one thing that I think is important is self-sovereignty is important. And we think about sustainability, self-sustainability. We're very big on how do we develop our communities to be resilient to grid collapses, systems that may collapse, government collapses, power collapses. But what is even more important than sovereignty or self-custody is stewardship. Stewardship is the thing that actually produces results for humanity. You can fall back on sovereignty and personal resilience and even community resilience, but if we can develop a culture of stewardship, which actually demands integration, that's where you get strength. That's where you get strength on the network effect. So this is where I really say, okay, everybody keep building your solutions, but whatever solution you're making, whether it's tech, whether it's physical, whatever it is, think about the integration points, because it's between all of these nodes. It's the integrations and the pathways, just like our neural pathways work in our brain and our cognition and the way we think and how we develop. These are always forming. It's the integration between all of these solutions that create stability and that create resilience across the human species. So, sovereignty, stewardship, a lot of the tech solutions are focused on how do you take care of yourself, take care of your data. All that's important. But if we don't have integration points that keep us interconnected as humans and as an ecology, then none of that really matters. Then we're all just in silos trying to survive.
Yeah, fully agree. We don't want to be creating separate islands where we're completely cut off from each other. Humans are, I would say, naturally social creatures, and I think we benefit from that in a lot of ways. So to keep those ties together, I think is very beneficial.
Francis has a quick one here. Couple of good points. Rent, lease, build spaces that aren't being used. Community spots, town, cities more walkable. If you're not familiar with cul-de-sac, that's a good model to look at. They're down in Arizona right now, developing, designing communities that are walkable and bikeable. If you haven't been to Holland, Amsterdam, I'm going to talk about bikeable and walkable. That's obviously a good one. I've been really impressed. Just speaking on transit really quickly. I've been really impressed and dismayed. Been impressed by a lot of the cities I've been traveling through in their public transit systems. The world is really making excellent progress, I think, in rail and bus systems in what traditionally were undeveloped nations. They've made amazing progress all over the place. The US is still lagging a bit on that, but there is actually really exciting stuff happening in the US with passenger rail. There is a massive investment going into passenger rail in the US, which we are actually following a strategy for rural development. So we're specifically going to areas where we know the rail lines are going. There's even one, I've just been speaking with somebody in Alberta, Canada recently, where there's a rail line proposed from Alberta straight down to Montana, which will connect east-west and then straight down to Denver, down to Texas. So human movement is part of the liquidity model. I think that's what creates flourishing. Just like we need blood and oxygen flowing through our systems, people need to be traveling through the world. And this movement, this travel, this dynamic kind of energy flowing between urban and rural communities is what actually stimulates growth and creates amazing connections between all these places. That creates the networking, the actual physical networking that supports the digital networking. So people being able to move from place to place is the physical manifestation of them being connected digitally. And we can go off on a whole nother call, but spiritually also maybe. So that's another topic, but that dynamism is really important. And speaking to buy, rent, lease, built spaces that aren't being used, this is a big initiative for us as well. And working with Build Cities in rural development. It's interesting in the US and other countries as well. There are a lot of communities that were practically abandoned or depressed through the technological revolution. So of course you had the Industrial Revolution where resources were being extracted or industrial towns, exploded in areas. You can see this all across Eastern Europe, Africa, even India, Asia, definitely in the US and a bunch of areas. And then as the tech revolution emerged, those places emptied out, people moved to cities, and they crashed. Well, there's already infrastructure available there. I don't know if Mike's still on the call, but Mike Mackey here is involved in a community down in Oregon. Very small community, not a lot of houses. But this is a place where there are properties, there's already infrastructure in place, and there's an ability to actually reactivate this infrastructure and create another small nourishing mode, flourishing mode there. So that's one of our focuses is how do we go to depressed areas, take what's already there, and then reinvigorate it. One of the partners of Build Cities is up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, a very nondescript little town that most people have never heard of. I can still barely spell, but they renovated this big abandoned warehouse, turned it into co-working, put a cafe in there. There are international AI and tech companies moving to Coeur d'Alene now. They're launching startups out of there. This tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, you'd think, and there are people moving there with their whole entire businesses just to become part of the community, collaborate together, and launch what they're building. If we can magnify this across small towns, rural communities all over the world, that creates anybody in tech, that creates your network. If you've got nodes everywhere, you can have failures in certain areas, whether it's climatic failures, whether it's system failures, whatever it is, people are able to relocate quickly. Tech is redundant. You're able to move around. So I'm really excited about finding and repurposing places that can be rejuvenated and reactivated. And a lot of people say, well, it's a higher cost to renovate than to build fresh. Yeah, well, those are people that we don't really, that's legacy systems. Those are BlackRock actors. Those are groups that are focused on the absolute bottom line. And I think what we're dealing with here, the people that are here today, are really more about how do we actually rejuvenate, reinvigorate, and build with what we have. That's resource management.
And to the point of empty spaces and empty buildings, I was actually recently at or in Detroit for MCon event that was going on. Detroit is a great example of how you can redevelop properties for different use cases. For example, Detroit, I think, has one of the greatest number of urban farms of any major city in the United States. So there's a lot of empty lots where homes once existed that were removed because they were left sitting abandoned for a prolonged period of time, and those became brown sites or empty lots. And people went in and started developing them to create community gardens, urban farms, etc., putting greenhouses on those properties. There's also a lot of abandoned buildings that are being retrofitted to serve other purposes. So Detroit's a really good example of that. It's actually really cool to have. I had never been out there previously, and I don't even live all that far, but I was absolutely fascinated with the way that they were redeveloping the area. It's very, very cool.
This is exciting with the passenger rail I was speaking to also, is that they're actually going to just repurpose the lines and the stations that were abandoned originally in the 70s, right? So we're able to, people say, oh, is it high-speed rail? Well, again, this is another cultural kind of narrative media thing that says high-speed rail are the solutions. No, that's thinking in a very linear way, right? If we're developing these nodes and these places everywhere and we're creating the appropriate transportation solution, then people are not thinking about, I have to be here and go there in the shortest amount of time possible. I love taking the train. I can hop from town to town. I could spend days doing this as long as I've got a good internet connection on my train and I've got a comfortable seat. I go hang out in the dining car and the lounge car, meet people every time. Amazed the whole time I'm working. It's just like a mobile office out there. So this really speaks to a very big shift in, hey Natalie, thanks for coming through. A big shift in how we think about lifestyle and how we're living. And that's one more plug here. You see over my shoulder here, this little car. this future car along with the rest of our future stuff. So that's Aptera Motors, and ambassador for them as well. Follow next month. I'm going to be in Vegas at CES for the unveiling of the production model, first vehicle off the line with the official VIN. And this is a solar powered electric vehicle. And it's a shock to most of the auto industry because they're just stuck in these paradigms. But if we start with efficiency, like the founders here have been completely committed to efficiency as the starting point, then we think about a whole new model. Like that doesn't look like a regular car, obviously, but it absolutely meets the needs for transportation, for absolutely efficient energy consumption, solar powered production on a vehicle. So it's this interesting interplay, and this is the same type of interplay between regenerative and decentralized across different audiences. There's also the interplay between rethinking entire paradigms while at the same time repurposing existing systems and regenerating and rejuvenating those. So there's a mix between taking what we have instead of throwing it all away, taking what we have, making it better, and doing that in a way that we're actually thinking completely anew about how we're doing those things.
It's actually fascinating that you mentioned reusing the rail systems. I'm familiar with the project that they've developed or that they're working on. It's like I forget how many year plan that they're proposing, but it would connect all the major cities, basically in the United States, through this rail system. And one of the rail systems is an old rail system that used to connect, I believe it's St. Paul with Chicago. And the plan is to actually use that old rail system that exists there, and repurposing it for specifically that transportation train to to bring them back there. And then I think it's supposed to loop up towards New York and then kind of follow down along the East Coast. And there's a connection that goes down to Atlanta, and another one that was proposed that's going down to like Texas, and then from Texas over to the West Coast. And really cool to see that happen. I wish that was already in existence, to be honest.
Yeah, the maps are amazing, but they have the actual by 2026 they're going to have their entire fleet redesigned. So they're going to have all new cars, new ways of traveling on their high energy efficient locomotives, Amtrak. I follow this deeply. I've got the maps and all sorts of cool details if anybody. But again, that's just a bit of a paradigm. You are not having to commute every day in and out of an office or to a job back and forth, but you potentially need to go to a location once or twice a week. Well, who cares if it's a 3-hour commute if you're sitting in a comfortable chair, either watching a show or getting some work done and having a dining car? Like the ideas of commute change completely, right? And the paradigm shift is what's so important to that. I have a lot of conversations with people. I just had this with my own family members in the last couple of weeks where I'm like, you guys should, set up stuff over in this area. And they say, well, but then I have to sell the house. I don't think so-and-so wants to move. I'm like, you're thinking linearly. That's not how the network works. That's not how the brains actually work. This whole idea about some kind of limited dichotomy or linear thought is purely a product of industrialization. We've only been thinking this way for about 100 years. So open the brain again and we start to think about actually how we used to function and how we used to be connected. And we start to think of whole new ways of doing that. Aptera, we're specifically going to have in all of our properties. So if you have a property where you're going to go out in this rural area and stay for a month or two, if you can take the train from your city to that location and then have a vehicle available there, you don't have to even own a car anymore. You don't have to think about a car. You don't have to think about taking care of something. The solution is already there for you, right? So we're creating this ecosystem of solutions that support the lifestyle so that everybody can live freely and travel between there and live the life that they want to. And good news, I've been deeply involved with Aptera. Production unit is coming off the line right now. They're going to unveil it in Vegas in January, and news is getting exciting. And yeah, if you tune in, I'll definitely keep you updates on that. And Francis, if you want to shoot me a private message with your contact, actually, I'll shoot you a message here and then we can connect. And I'll give you more Amtrak info. We'll start. Offense is in the call here. He's going to start publishing more stuff for us. So we have a lot of information to share. He's getting involved in supporting our social media efforts. And
Yeah, man.
Amtrak, Aptera, all these things I'm going to be publishing a lot more and sharing with people so we can get this information out for everybody.
No, yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm here. I'm just listening in, because I'm new to this conversation, so I'm learning as I can, and of course, I'm gonna be sharing the content that comes out of this webinar.
Perfect. You're stepping into a crazy world, Offense. The
Yeah,
building
man,
the
I'm
future.
listening deep. For sure, man, for sure, man. And with us, I mean, like where I am in Africa, so it's not, often enough that such conversations are had. So I'm listening in deeply, and I'm just finding those nuggets that I can share with my people, so we can start to think, about how we can become global citizens. Some of us love traveling, although we haven't done much of it, but we hope we can, sort of, get this inspiration and give it to other people. And of course, as they do it, we also do it ourselves.
Well, you're plugging into the right communities between VDAO, Build Cities, a lot of other people here connected, people active in this space. There's a lot of information to be shared. Offense is in South Africa, Christian.
Yeah, yeah, I'm here.
I'm going to drop a couple of my links real quick in here for Francis, if anybody else wants to follow there, so you can connect with me directly.
All right, Justin, how are we
Pretty
doing? Oh, go ahead.
I'm pretty active in Telegram, X, and LinkedIn, but I'm pretty much available on any channel. So you can look for me wherever I'm at.
All right. And I'm just being aware, being conscious of time. We're getting close to the top of the hour now. And maybe if there's a couple more questions or thoughts to be shared, be a great time to do so now. Josh, it's been absolutely amazing having you here. It's been a great conversation. It's great to see so many folks and be connecting with so many new folks as well. So I just want to say on behalf of the community and myself, obviously, thank you very much for taking your time to be here today.
That's great. I really, really appreciate this. Those who know me that I'm usually loath to get in front of a camera. I'm not a fan of being out there speaking publicly. I kind of avoided it for a long time based on a variety of backgrounds and such. But I think this is also part of what we have to do. Anybody who really is advocating for this, if we really are serious about building something new and contributing to a new world and making better people, or any of the things that we're all really here for, we got to suck it up, do the work, show up, speak up, put in the effort. There's a great Swami that said, we are not entitled to the results, we're only entitled to the work. So this is one of my things. I'm going to flip one really quickly here and ask you, actually, Ben. This is something I like to ask in a lot of the interviews I'm in. I've put out a bunch of messages. What's a message you have for people that are here that are trying to make a difference, that are trying to build their projects, that are working, that are doing something out here. What is a message you share with people often?
Connect with as many people as you can. I think that's the important thing to do, is to well, this does feel like a very niche space in a very small corner of the world. There's actually quite a few folks that are working on all these various things that are related. And you'd be surprised at who you will find along that journey. And your life will be ever more enriched for it. Like I kind of came into the regenerative space just recently, a few years ago. In the amount of knowledge that I've gained and experience that I've gained, in the connections that I've made over these past few years has been phenomenal. What I believe there's the saying of like your net worth is your network. I think it's very true in this space that yeah, the more people you can connect with, the stronger and the better off we all will be.
In real life, connect in real life. I think that's a
Yes,
huge
connecting in
part.
real life, very important.
We have amazing digital communities, but put in the effort to show up, get face to face, hug a lot, as much as you can, shake hands, get the contact. This is what we're actually designed for, right? We're designed to connect in real life. Digital is cool, it's great, it keeps things going, but I think that the fundamental experience is connecting. I haven't had a chance to connect with you yet in real life, Ben, Christian, hopefully soon here. But that's where it's at. There's no substitute for the eye to eye, skin to skin, beard to beard, whatever. There's no substitute for this.
And will you be are you planning to be in East Denver this coming year?
I am planning on that. Yes, I got family in the Springs. So I do intend to be there. And like I said, we are going to be having our campaign here. Hope to connect with you there in spring and then fall also. So yeah, we'll be seeing you for sure this year here.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. We'll definitely be connecting in the IRL, and it'll be amazing for sure. Really looking forward to it. Just a quick note to everybody who's still here with us. Next week we have our last virtual event of the year before we will start things mid-January. January 14th, it'll be our first community call of the year. It'll be kind of a reflection on the last year and looking ahead at the year for 2025. And then we'll continue our weekly virtual events again from that moment on. Next week, we have Danilo, who is the Director of Data Solutions for Fifth World, who will be joining us. He will be sharing Regen Tracker. It's a newly released thing that's been developed by Fifth World. Really be digging into how do you leverage the data from your land to make really smart decisions, cost-effective decisions when you're designing your land for regenerative purposes. So that'll be another great one next week. That'll be on the Tuesday the 17th. I think it's the 17th. And I think that's around 1 p.m. that will kick off, 1 or 12 p.m. You'll be able to find it on our Discord, also on LinkedIn, and then also on our Twitter, or X, as it's now known. Yeah, again, Josh, really appreciative for you taking the time to join us, and even more special hearing now that you don't really like getting in front of the camera. So it makes me feel even that much more lucky to have you with us. So thank you again.
You guys draw it out in me. Between you holding down the digital movement, Fifth World on that's Chris on the physical events, been able to hang out with Chris at a couple events now. Your team is doing amazing work on the virtual side, on the community side, and Fifth World doing amazing work on the real built world side of things. So these are the integration points, and it's a privilege to be hanging out with you guys and building together.
Absolutely amazing. Can't wait for the next one. I can't wait for East Denver. If anybody else is
That's
gonna be
right.
at, if anybody else is gonna be at East Denver, VDAO, Fifth World, Loki, Joshua, everybody's gonna be there. It's gonna be amazing.
Thanks so much, everybody coming out who's been around for a while. You guys are all amazing. It's great to be building with all of you as well.
Yeah, really, it's amazing to have so many people showing up, and again, a lot of new faces during this one, and it's great to connect. And I hope we can stay connected. But yeah, amazing. Any final thoughts or anything, or otherwise we can say goodbye.
Just thank you.
Just one final thought from me.
Yeah, go for it.
So I just wanted just to find out, so I hear you guys speaking about all of this places, so have you guys started to think about as to how you can get other continents to be involved in such events, for instance, like Africa?
There are numerous communities in Africa. Offense, you're going to be plugging into these here as you are getting on the ride with us. So let me tell you that there are a lot of people and communities and projects happening in Africa specifically. VDAO is in India right now for an event. I think it's right now, isn't it? Or was it last week, maybe?
Yesterday, actually, we just hosted
Yesterday.
an event in Bangalore while it was just after India Blockchain Week came to an end. We did a regenerative network state social and invited folks that were interested in the space to come together and just sort of discuss these kinds of topics in kind of a very rather informal kind of format. But yeah, that was just this Monday.
Obviously, Asia, a bunch of events in just the last few months. South America, a lot of things happening. So yeah, Fense, I'll keep plugging you in with groups as I have been so far. You're going to find that Africa has a movement rising. And, as an example, Africa was way ahead of the mobile finance game. They've been ahead of the internet game. And that's because there's so much need and there's so much opportunity. So I think you're in a really good position and you're making the right friends right now with all of us in all of our circles to really move that forward. You're
Yeah,
going to
for
have a
sure,
lot of
man. For
support
sure,
as
man.
you
For sure,
build.
man.
As
Yeah.
you build, you're going to have a lot of people
Yeah,
pushing
man.
behind
Yeah.
you all over the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know that in my case, just so I can just also plug myself in, I'm 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 in the center of a really big development, building a smart city, 5,000 hectares of land. I'm looking to house in at least 70,000 tech professionals from all walks of life. So I hope, as we connect about these concepts, we can also, find ways to also collaborate and see how we can also unearth the tech talent that, has been hidden, in the African continent.
Yeah, looking forward to working with you more, Offensi. Thanks, Ben. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate all of your time. This is great. Looking forward to the next one. Definitely keep plugging into VDAO calls here. I'm looking forward to next week. There's going to be some good info, and it's a great community to be working with.
Thank you all so much. Cheers.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you, everyone, for organizing. It was great.
Thanks, Nick.
Have a great rest of your day, everybody.